It was a quiet morning in Winterfell when Maester Luwin walked into Ned Stark's solar, holding a scroll sealed with a strange mark, a dragon surrounded by snow. The air was cold, but the news in his hand carried a weight heavier than the winter wind. "My lord," Luwin said, bowing, "this raven, it came from the citadel. It's urgent, about your bloodline." Ned took the scroll, unsealing it with tired hands. He had seen enough war, enough secrets. But this one shook him. The letter revealed a hidden truth. Jon Arryn, the late hand of the king, had discovered something before his death. Not about the Lannisters, but about Ned himself. A secret passed down from the old Targaryen records, sealed and forgotten. According to the Citadel's archives, Ned Stark was not only a Stark, he was the last living Targaryen heir. His mother had been a Stark, that was true, but his father, not Rickard Stark. The scroll claimed Ned was the son of Queen Rhaella Targaryen and a northern lord, born during the last days of the Mad King's rule. His existence was hidden to protect him from Robert's rebellion. He was taken north and raised as a Stark to keep him safe. Not even he had known the truth. Ned dropped the scroll, his face pale. "This must be false," he whispered. "Some political game. I am no Targaryen. I am Eddard Stark." But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Why had his father never treated him the same as Brandon? Why had the old Maester from the Vale once called him the fire in the frost? His whole life, loyalty, honor, family, it all started to feel like it had been built on lies. That night, he sat alone in the godswood. The red leaves rustled above him, and the face carved into the weirwood seemed to watch him, almost speaking. Catelyn approached him quietly. "You've barely spoken since the raven came. What troubles you?" Ned looked at her. "Everything I knew about myself, Tillis, may be false, and if what this letter says is true, then I have a blood claim to the Iron Throne." She took a moment to understand what that meant. "You? King of the Seven Kingdoms?" Ned shook his head. "I have no desire for thrones. I have no desire for war." But Catelyn saw the storm forming already. "Do you think the Lannisters will allow this to stay quiet? If this truth spreads, they'll see you as a threat. Robert, too." Ned knew she was right. Whether he wanted the crown or not, others would see him as a danger. The truth could start another war. In King's Landing, Varys already knew. The spider moved through the Red Keep like a shadow. He whispered into ears, paid off scribes, followed bloodlines like a spider follows threads. When the raven from the citadel flew south, Varys had eyes on it. He told no one at first, not Littlefinger, not even the Queen. But he knew one thing. If Ned Stark was truly a Targaryen, then Robert's rule was built on a lie, and lies in the Game of Thrones could kill kings. Back in Winterfell, Jon Snow found the letter by accident while helping Maester Luwin organize scrolls. When he read it, he froze. He rushed to his father's chambers. "Is it true?" Jon asked. "Are you a Targaryen?" Ned looked at Jon for a long time. Then he said softly, "It seems I am, but that does not change who I am inside." Jon stepped back. "And what does that make me? If you are not truly a Stark," Ned closed the distance, "you are my son, in all the ways that matter." But doubt was already blooming in both of them. Who was Jon, really? If Ned's parentage was a lie, was Jon also hiding something deeper? In the south, Robert Baratheon had no idea that the man he once called brother might now be his greatest threat. But Cersei, she had spies too. And when the whispers reached her ears, her face hardened with fury. "Eddard Stark is no loyal dog," she said to Jaime. "He's a dragon, wearing wolf's skin, and dragons burn everything." She poured herself wine and smiled coldly. "It's time we remind him where power truly lies." Winterfell no longer felt safe. Ned Stark stood at the highest tower, looking over the cold lands of the north. He had spent years building peace here, raising his children, serving justice, keeping honor alive in a broken world. But now everything had changed. The truth about his blood was like wildfire beneath the snow, dangerous, burning, ready to explode. He hadn't told Robb yet, or Arya, or Sansa, not even Bran. He feared what it would do to them, to their sense of who they were. He feared that it might break them, but he couldn't keep it hidden forever. That morning, Maester Luwin brought another raven. This one came from the Vale, a short message, but one that cut like a blade. The Queen knows. Far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister stood before the Iron Throne. She ran her fingers along its cold metal edges as her spies. Reported everything. The scroll, the seal, the contents, the whispers rising in the north. So it was true, Ned Stark, that quiet, grim-faced man of honor, was a Targaryen, a dragon pretending to be a wolf, and worse, a rightful heir. Cersei didn't panic. She smiled. "If he has Targaryen blood," she said, "then he is my enemy, just like his mad ancestors." Jaime frowned. "He doesn't want the throne." Cersei sipped her wine. "It doesn't matter. Truth is poison. All it takes is one drop, and the whole kingdom will bleed." Robert Baratheon, for once, was sober. He sat on his throne, silent, gripping the armrests too tightly. Varys had just finished telling him everything. "My own friend," Robert muttered, "the man I trusted most. A Targaryen? All these years, and he never told me." Varys bowed his head. "He likely didn't know, Your Grace, but now that he does, the realm will hear of it." Robert stood, anger rising like thunder in his chest. "I killed Rhaegar with this hammer. I ended their line. And now another dragon crawls out of the snow? No, I will not let that happen." He called for Ser Barristan. "Send a royal summons. Eddard Stark is to come to King's Landing immediately. If he refuses, he'll be named traitor." Back in Winterfell, Ned prepared for war, not with swords, but with silence. He knew what was coming. The South would not ignore this truth. Robert would not allow a Targaryen, even a friend, to live freely. And the Lannisters, they would use this secret to crush him. He gathered his children that night by the fire. All of them, even Rickon, sat quietly as he spoke. "There is something you must know about me, something the world will soon learn." He told them everything. His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "I was born of fire and ice. My mother was a Stark, but my father was not." The room froze. Sansa looked confused. Arya's eyes widened. Robb clenched his jaw. "So, you're not really a Stark?" Robb asked. "I am," Ned said softly. "In every way that matters. I was raised here. I bled for this land. But by blood, I may be the last living Targaryen." Jon stood in the shadows. He didn't speak. The question burned in him. "And what about me?" But he couldn't ask. Not yet. 3 days later, the king's raven arrived. The scroll was sealed with the royal stamp, heavy and final. Ned opened it slowly, reading aloud in front of his bannermen. "By royal command, Lord Eddard Stark is summoned to King's Landing to answer charges of false identity and treason against the crown. Should he refuse, he shall be declared an enemy of the realm." A silence fell over the great hall. Lord Greatjon stood. "This is madness. You've done nothing but serve the realm." Sir Roderick slammed his fist. "This is no summons. This is a trap." Ned said nothing for a long while. Then he folded the scroll carefully and looked out the window toward the cold skies. "If I go south, I may never return." Catelyn stepped forward, pale but strong. "Then don't go. Let them come here. Let them try to take the north." But Ned shook his head. "If I refuse, they'll march on Winterfell. Innocents will die. And worse, war will break out again. I will not be the cause of another rebellion." Robb stepped forward, anger in his voice. "Then let me go with you. You won't go alone." Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You must stay. If something happens to me, the North will need a Stark." Jon looked at him then. "You're more than just a Stark now." Ned turned to him, his eyes filled with both love and sadness. "No," he said quietly. "I'm exactly what I've always been. A man trying to do the right thing, even when it costs everything." As he packed for the journey south, ravens flew from Winterfell to the Eyrie, to White Harbour, even to the Wall. Some carried words of peace, others carried warnings, and one, raven, blacker than night, flew to a place long forgotten, where a woman with silver hair and violet eyes sat by a fire, dreaming of dragons. Far across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen opened the scroll with trembling hands. The message was simple. He lives. The road to King's Landing was long, cold, and crawling with eyes. Ned Stark rode with only a small company. Sir Roderick, a handful of loyal guards, and his silent shadow, Jon Snow. The boy had insisted on coming. Ned had refused at first, but Jon wouldn't back down. "If they mean to call you a traitor," Jon had said, "then they'll call me one too." So they rode together, father and son, or so they believed. Each mile south felt heavier than the last. The air turned warmer, but Ned's heart only grew colder. He could feel it in his bones. Something terrible was waiting for him in the capital. And this time, honor would not be enough to save him. Back in King's Landing, Varys met with Littlefinger in the Red Keep's dark halls. "You've heard." "I assume," Varys whispered, "Lord Stark rides south." "The king means to question his loyalty." Littlefinger smirked, counting coins from a bag of gold. "Loyalty? That's not what this is. This is about blood. Old blood. Dragon blood." Varys gave a slow nod. "And dragons. Attract fire." Littlefinger leaned closer. "So who benefits if Stark burns?" Varys smiled thinly. "The same ones who always do. The ones already holding the throne." Cersei sat in her chamber, watching her youngest son play with a wooden lion. Her face was calm, but her thoughts were sharp. "The North will never kneel if they believe Ned Stark has a rightful claim," she said to Pycelle. "And Robert? He's too blind to see the threat. He still thinks they're friends." She looked out the window at the Red Keep's towers, but dragons don't make friends. They make ashes. She poured herself wine, her voice turning hard. "Prepare the dungeons, and make sure the executioner is ready. Eddard Stark will not leave this city alive." Ned's arrival at King's Landing was cold, despite the southern heat. No banners greeted him. No crowd, only Lannister guards in golden armor, waiting at the gates like lions ready to pounce. Jon reached for his sword, but Ned placed a hand on his arm. "Not yet," he whispered. "We came for truth, not war." Inside the throne room, Robert sat slouched on the Iron Throne, drunk, angry and confused. "You should have told me, Ned," he said, not unkindly. "All these years. And now I find out you might be one of them." "I didn't know," Ned replied. "I never wanted this." "I still don't." Cersei stood beside Robert, smiling without warmth. "Want it or not, your blood puts the crown in your reach, and that makes you dangerous." "I have never raised my hand against this realm," Ned said firmly. "I bled for Robert's rebellion. I helped build this peace." Cersei tilted her head. "And yet your very existence threatens it." Jon stepped forward, fury in his voice. "You fear him because you know he's the rightful king." Guards pointed their spears at Jon, but Ned raised his hand. "I do not want the throne," he said clearly. "I only want peace." Robert looked at him, eyes filled with conflict. Then he stood up and spoke like a king again, for once. "Then swear it. Swear before the gods and all the realm that you will never claim it. Never speak of this blood again." Ned hesitated. Around him, silence thickened. To lie, to deny his own blood, went against everything he stood for. But to speak the truth might doom them all. Ned began. But before he could finish, the doors burst open. Petyr Baelish entered with a scroll in hand and a mocking smile on his face. "My lords," he said, "forgive the interruption, but I believe this may change everything." He handed the scroll to Robert, who read it quickly, face twisting in shock. "What is this madness?" "It's from across the narrow sea," Littlefinger said. "Daenerys Targaryen knows. She's alive, she has dragons, and she now knows about Eddard's blood." Cersei smiled wickedly. "There it is, proof. One Targaryen on each side of the sea. The fire is rising again." That night, Ned and Jon were locked in separate cells beneath the Red Keep. The dungeons were cold and wet, and rats scurried across the stone floors. But Jon didn't care. He paced like a caged wolf, fists clenched. "They're going to kill you," Jon whispered to the darkness. "They'll call it justice." Ned sat quietly, staring at the wall. "If they do, it'll be for a lie I never told." "Strange, isn't it?" Jon stepped closer. "Is it true what Littlefinger said about Daenerys?" Ned nodded slowly. "It seems the last dragon is waking up." Jon's eyes narrowed. "Then maybe it's time the wolf did too." Far across the sea, in the city of Meereen, Daenerys Targaryen stared into her fire. Drogon growled beside her, sensing her rage. She had read the Raven's message 100 times. "Eddard Stark is one of us. A Targaryen hidden in the snow. They mean to kill him." Her voice trembled with fury. "They killed my brother. They stole my throne. And now they come for him." She looked toward the west, toward Westeros. "Let them try. If they want to kill a dragon, let them burn first." In the cold black cell beneath the Red Keep, Ned Stark sat with his back against the stone wall, eyes closed, heart heavy. The chains on his wrists didn't hurt nearly as much as the betrayal. Not just from Robert, but from the whole realm. He had served it with honor, fought wars for it, protected it even from itself. And now, because of a truth he never asked for, he was being treated like a traitor. Outside his cell, Jon Snow stood between two guards, his face bloodied from resisting them earlier. "Let me speak to him," Jon growled. The guards hesitated but then opened the door. Jon rushed in and dropped to one knee in front of Ned. "They're going to kill you," Jon said, his voice shaking. "Cersei wants your head, and Robert's too drunk to stop her." Ned nodded slowly. "I feared it would come to this. We can fight. There's still time. Robb will march south. The North will not sit quietly." But Ned raised a hand. "No, no more war. Too many have died already for crowns and names." Jon stood, fists clenched. "Then what? You'll just die here? For a name you didn't ask for?" Ned looked at him, his voice low. "Sometimes dying with honor is better than living with shame." Jon turned away, teeth gritted. "That's not honor. That's surrender." That same night, Varys crept into Ned's cell. The torch in his hand lit up the cold, damp stone around them. "I bring news, Lord Stark," the spider whispered. "There is a way out. But you must listen carefully." Ned narrowed his eyes. "Why would you help me?" Varys stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. "Because war is coming. Whether you want the throne or not, the realm believes you are a threat. Cersei wants your death. But Robert still hesitates. If you kneel, if you confess to treason, she might let you live." "And say what?" Ned asked bitterly. "That I lied about my own blood?" Varys looked at him hard. "Say what they want to hear. Swallow your pride. Stay alive. You still have a part to play in this game. Die now and they win." Ned stared at the ground. He hated everything about this. But in his mind he saw Arya, Sansa, Robb, Jon, even little Rickon. If he died now, their lives would be at risk too. "What must I say?" he asked softly. Varys gave a thin smile. The next day, all of King's Landing gathered in the Great Sept. The sun shone through stained glass, casting colourful light on a scene full of tension. The Iron Throne stood empty. Robert was absent. Cersei stood in his place, wearing a crown of gold and a smile of poison. Ned Stark was dragged forward in chains, his hair wild, face unshaved. His eyes scanned the crowd. He saw Sansa crying behind the Queen. He didn't see Arya. Good, she had escaped. Cersei stepped forward. "Eddard Stark, you are charged with high treason. Do you wish to confess?" The crowd fell silent. Ned took a long breath. The truth burned on his tongue. "I confess," he said finally. "I am no true heir. I lied. I am not of Targaryen blood. I betrayed the crown by hiding behind false names and old stories. I deserve mercy." Gasps filled the sept. Cersei smiled. The crown is merciful. You shall be sent to the wall. You will live, but you will never return, the crowd murmured. Some cheered, some frowned, but one person was not pleased. Joffrey, the boy king, stepped forward with wide eyes and a twisted grin. No, he said loud and clear. He is a traitor. He must die. Cersei's face went pale. Joffrey, no, I am the king, Joffrey shouted. Bring me his head. Screams echoed in the sept. Sansa collapsed. Cersei lunged forward, but the guards didn't hesitate. Ned was forced to his knees. Jon, hidden in the crowd, drew his sword. But too late. The executioner raised the blade. Then, chaos. From the back of the sept, a loud horn blew. Soldiers wearing grey cloaks and direwolf sigils stormed in. Robb Stark had arrived. Swords clashed. Arrows flew. The High Septon ducked behind the altar. Jon broke free and rushed to his father's side, fighting through Lannister guards with wild fury. Ned looked up, dazed, bleeding from a cut on his cheek. Jon? He asked. Jon slashed down another guard and grabbed Ned's chains. We're getting out of here. Robb brought half the North with him. Behind them, Robb cut through the gold cloaks with ice, their father's sword, roaring like a storm. Outside the sept, the city was in full riot. Fire spread through the lower streets. Bells rang in panic. And high above it all, a raven soared westward, carrying one message from King's Landing to Dragonstone. The North has risen. The wolf lives. The realm bleeds again. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys read the message by candlelight. They tried to kill him, she whispered. They failed. She turned to her soldiers. To the Dothraki. To her dragons. Prepare the ships. We go to Westeros. Fire burned in her eyes, and we will take back everything they stole from us. The smoke from King's Landing rose high into the sky like black fingers clawing at the sun. The sept of Baelor was stained with blood. The cobblestones outside were littered with broken shields, dead gold cloaks and scattered banners, some bearing lions, others direwolves. It had been chaos, and in that chaos a miracle had happened. Ned Stark had escaped. Robb had pulled his father from the jaws of death and now led him north through the King's Road, guarded by bannermen from the north, the Vale, and even a few Riverlands men who had joined their cause the moment they heard what Joffrey had done. Jon rode close to Ned, silent and watchful. He hadn't spoken much since the fight. He had killed a man that day, his first outside the wall, and worse, he had nearly lost the man he called father. You shouldn't have confessed, Jon said finally. Breaking the silence, Ned didn't answer for a moment. The wind whistled through the trees. I confessed. To buy time, Ned said. To live long enough to warn the realm. Warn them of what? Ned turned, eyes dark. Of what's coming. In the Red Keep, Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, with his legs crossed and his mouth full of honeyed figs. His crown hung crooked on his head. He smiled as if he'd just won a game. I made a decision, he said. I was strong. The people love a strong king. Cersei stood by the window, not even looking at him. Her face was pale, her lips tight. You made a mess, she said coldly. The North is at war. The Riverlands are turning. Even the Vale might join them. And now Ned Stark is alive and he's not hiding anymore. Joffrey shrugged. Then kill him again. Cersei walked toward him and slapped him hard across the face. The whole room froze. You little fool, she hissed. You don't understand what you've done. You didn't kill a man. You woke a monster. Far away in Winterfell, the banners of the great houses of the north flapped in the cold wind. The great hall was full. Lords from House Umber, Karstark, Manderley, and more had gathered to hear Ned speak. He stood at the high table, tall and grim, no longer hiding. I never asked for a crown, he said, but they tried to take my head for a truth I never chose. Now they will feel the weight of the north. A roar went up through the hall. For the king in the north. Someone shouted, and suddenly every lord repeated it. Over and over, the king in the north. The king in the north. Ned raised a hand to quiet them. I am a Stark by heart, he said, voice steady. But by blood, I am Targaryen. The South will fear that. They will twist it. But I say let them come. He turned to Robb. You are my son. My blood or not, that has never changed. And if I fall, You must lead. Rob nodded, his eyes burning with fire. John stood at the back, watching. The words echoed in his ears. My son. My blood or not? There it was again, the hesitation. The doubt. The question John had carried all his life. He stepped forward slowly. Then tell me the truth, John said loud enough for all to hear. If you are not a true Stark, then who am I? The hall fell silent. Ned looked at John, and for the first time the truth was too heavy to hold back. You are not my son, he said. But you are my blood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You are the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, and my sister Lyanna. John's heart stopped. No, he whispered. Yes, Ned said softly. We hid it to protect you. Robert would have killed you if he knew. But now the world must know. You are Aegon Targaryen, the true heir to the Iron Throne. John stepped back like the words had struck him in the chest. I don't want it, he said. I didn't either, Ned said. But the world doesn't care what we want. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood at the bow of her ship, watching the coastline of Westeros appear through the mist. 3 dragons flew above her, circling like shadows of war. Tyrion stood beside her, reading the Raven's message again. So, he lives, Tyrion said. Eddard Stark, and he has declared himself, Daenerys nodded. The wolf is awake, and he calls himself king. Tyrion folded the paper. And your response? She looked forward, her silver hair blowing in the sea wind. I will speak with him, she said. Before I burn his world down, I'll see what kind of king he really is. And so, 2 dragons now stood on opposite sides of the realm, one raised in fire, the other raised in frost, and in between them, the realm began to tear itself apart. The snow in the north had started to fall thicker earlier than usual. It wasn't just a sign of winter, it was a warning. Everything was shifting. Old truths were dying, and new ones were being born in blood. Inside Winterfell's war room, Ned Stark stood over a large map spread across the table. Small carved pieces, lions, wolves, krakens, dragons, marked the positions of every major house. Some pieces had already been knocked off the board. Some were being moved closer to war. Rob pointed at the Riverlands. House Frey still hasn't answered our Raven. If they side with the Lannisters again, we'll be pinched between the twins and the West. Ned nodded slowly, but his eyes weren't on the map. They were on Jon. Jon had been silent for days, ever since the truth was revealed. Aegon Targaryen. That name didn't feel like his. It felt like someone else's ghost, chasing him through every hallway in the castle. Jon, Ned said carefully, I know this truth has burdened you. But you should have told me, Jon cut in. His voice wasn't angry and it was hollow. All my life I believed I was your bastard. I lived with that shame. I bled for it, and now I'm not even that. You are more, Ned said, stepping closer. You are the blood of 2 great houses, Stark and Targaryen. That is not a curse, Jon. It is power. Jon looked away. I never wanted power. Far to the south, Daenerys Targaryen's fleet had made landfall. She stood on the rocky shores of Dragonstone, her ancestral home. Dragon roared from above, shaking the clouds. Soldiers, Dothraki riders, unsullied captains, all stood waiting for her command. Tyrion came beside her, his cloak whipping in the wind. A raven came this morning, he said. From Winterfell. Daenerys raised her brow. The wolf writes to the dragon. Apparently, yes, Tyrion replied. He proposes a meeting. Daenerys thought for a long moment. Is it a trap? Could be, Tyrion said. Or it could be something worse, honest. She smirked at that, then let him come. Let the Stark who carries Targaryen blood kneel before his queen. Back in Winterfell, Ned and Jon sat in the godswood beneath the red leaves. The heart tree seemed to listen as they spoke. I want to go, Jon said finally. To Dragonstone? Ned asked. Jon nodded. She has dragons, an army. She knows how to fight. But more than that, she has a claim, like me. If this war is to be avoided, it starts with us. Ned looked hesitant. And what if she sees you as a threat? Jon's jaw tightened. Then I'll look her in the eyes and show her I'm not. Ned reached into his cloak and pulled out a scroll. It was sealed with the direwolf sigil. Take this. If anything happens, send word. Jon took the scroll. For a moment, he looked like the boy who used to chase snowflakes in the yard. But that boy was long gone. The ship ride south was quiet. Jon watched the sea while Davos steered the ship. "You look seasick," Davos joked. "I feel seasick," Jon replied. "But I think it's just nerves." "You're about to meet the mother of dragons," Davos said. "It's natural." Jon looked down at his gloved hands. "I'm not sure if I'm meeting an ally or someone who wants me dead." "Well," Davos said, "say the right words, and you might walk out alive." Jon looked up at the dark clouds rolling in from the east. "Let's hope I say the right ones." On Dragonstone, the castle halls were dark and echoing. Fire torches lit the way as Jon Snow walked side by side with Davos toward the throne room. Then the doors opened. She was waiting for him on the black stone throne. Daenerys Stormborn, the unburnt, the breaker of chains. Jon stopped a few feet before her. Their eyes locked. "Your Grace," he said with a respectful bow. "You may rise," Daenerys said, her voice calm but sharp. "You came a long way, Jon Snow. Or should I call you Aegon?" Jon tensed. "I didn't come here to claim anything." "Then why are you here?" she asked. "To stop a war before it begins." Tyrion stepped forward. "The North has already crowned your father king. Why shouldn't we see that as rebellion?" "Because my father never wanted the throne," Jon said. "And neither do I." Daenerys leaned forward. "Then who should wear the crown, Jon Snow? Me or you?" Jon took a breath. "I think we should stop talking about crowns," he said, "and start talking about the real threat." Her eyes narrowed. "What threat?" He looked at her, voice steady. "Winter is here, and it brings death with it. Not lions or wolves, but the dead. I came because we'll need dragons and wolves, fire and ice. Or we'll all burn together." The room went still. Daenerys looked at Tyrion, then back at Jon for the first time. Her voice softened. "Then let's begin." Outside, high above Dragonstone, Drogon let out a mighty roar, one that echoed across the sea, reaching even the icy winds of the far north. And beyond the wall, something answered. Beyond the wall, where the cold never broke and the sun barely rose, the earth was cracking with footsteps that didn't belong to the living. The White Walkers were on the move. Their icy blue eyes lit up the night as they marched silently, an army of the dead trailing behind them. Men, women, children, at once alive, now hollowed out husks. The snow beneath their feet didn't melt. The cold around them didn't move. It grew thicker, and at their front rode the Night King, expressionless, silent, and watching. He did not speak. He did not rage. But he had seen the dragon rise, and now he was ready to answer it. In Dragonstone, Jon stood beside Daenerys on the cliffs overlooking the sea. The wind tore at their cloaks, but neither of them moved. They had spent 2 days speaking behind closed doors, and for the first time, fire and ice had started to melt into something resembling trust. Still, Jon could feel the weight of every word. "You believe me now," Jon said, watching the waves below. "I do," Daenerys replied quietly. "It's not easy to believe in ghosts and ice monsters, but the way you speak, it's not madness. It's warning." Jon nodded. "We don't have time for a war between dragons and wolves. If the dead reach the south, it won't matter who sits the Iron Throne." Daenerys turned toward him. "Then we must show the realm the truth. You said you fought them. That others have too. We need proof. Something even the Lannisters can't deny." Jon's jaw tightened. "Then I'll go back beyond the wall. I'll bring one of them here." Daenerys blinked, stepping closer. "That's suicide." Jon looked at her. "It's necessary." Tyrion, who had been quietly listening behind them, finally spoke. "If you're going, you'll need help. Good men, fighters." "I already know who I need," Jon said. Back in Winterfell, Arya had returned. She arrived at dawn wearing a cloak of shadow and snow. The guards barely saw her until she was already walking through the gates. When Sansa saw her sister again, she didn't cry. She just stared, then hugged her tightly. "I thought you were dead," Sansa whispered. Arya smiled faintly. "A lot of people did." Later, they stood together on the ramparts, watching the sky turn grey. "Father's alive. Jon is something else entirely. And the world is changing faster than we can keep up." Arya leaned on the wall. "The world always changes. We just kill the people who try to stop it. Sansa looked at her. That's not how I remember you. Arya smiled, colder this time. You don't know me anymore. Just then, a horn sounded at the gate. Robb rushed out to meet the arriving riders, and at their front was Jon Snow. He dismounted quickly, embracing Robb with a grin. It's been too long, brother. Not long enough, Robb joked. But the relief was written all over his face. Inside the hall, the Stark children, those who remained, sat together for the first time in years. Jon spoke fast. I need volunteers, fighters. I'm heading beyond the wall. Arya raised a brow. Did you hit your head? They need to see one, Jon said. The South doesn't believe in fairy tales. They think the North is full of stories. Then bring them a nightmare, Arya whispered. Tormund Giantsbane stepped forward from the side. You know I'll come. We fought them before. We'll fight them again, Jon nodded. Good. We leave at dawn. Robb stood, placing a hand on Jon's shoulder. If you don't return. Jon didn't flinch. Then ride south and tell them what happened. But I will return. I have to. 3 days later, the party stood beyond the wall, a ragged group of warriors, bastards, wildlings, and even a few Night's Watch rangers who had survived. The cold bit harder out here. The snow fell sideways. Even the sky looked dead. We need to find one and trap it, Jon said, pulling his cloak tighter. Quick and quiet, Tormund chuckled. Nothing about this is quiet. They moved through the forest of ice, past frozen lakes and dead trees. Then they heard it, the dragging of bones, the chattering teeth, the wind moaning in a voice that didn't belong to the living. The dead had found them. They came fast, more than a dozen wights, charging without fear, their limbs broken and twisted, their faces frozen in horror. Jon swung Longclaw and decapitated one. Gendry slammed another with his hammer. The hound roared and split skulls, but then, from the tree line, one walked slower. A White Walker. Jon shouted, That one! Don't kill it! Surround it! They fought like demons. And finally they knocked it unconscious, binding it with chains made from dragon glass and rope soaked in oil. We have it, Jon yelled. But then the air turned cold. Too cold. They looked up. The Night King had arrived. He stood across the frozen lake, silent, watching. Jon's blood turned to ice. Run, he whispered. Everyone, run! As they escaped, carrying the trapped wight, a giant horn blew in the distance. On Dragonstone, Daenerys stood atop Drogon. Readying to fly north, she had felt something in her chest, something dark, something ancient. The dead were not coming. They were already here. The sky cracked open with thunder as Daenerys. Targaryen flew northward on Drogon, flanked by Rhaegal and Viserion. Below her the world was turning white. Snowstorms, ice, wind howling like wolves. But ahead there was something far colder. She saw them. Jon's group was surrounded on a frozen lake, figures moving like shadows in a nightmare, blades flashing, dead bodies falling, rising again, and falling once more. At the center, Jon stood over a fallen Tormund, trying to pull him back while swinging Longclaw with desperate strength. Their captured wights snarled beside them, chained and thrashing. When Drogon roared down from the sky, the entire lake exploded with flame. The wights screamed as fire lit the ice, burning hundreds in seconds. Jon turned, seeing Daenerys land behind him. She stretched out her hand. Get on! Jon didn't wait. He pulled Tormund over Drogon's back. The others climbed too, the Hound, Gendry, Beric. The moment they were on, Daenerys screamed, Fly! But then a sound, sharp, cruel, icy, from the far ridge. The Night King raised a spear of pure ice. Jon turned just in time to see him throw it. The ice spear soared through the blizzard, fast, silent, deadly, and it struck not Drogon. Viserion, the dragon, shrieked in pain, wings shattering mid-flight. Blood, like blue fire, burst from its chest as it spun through the air and then crashed into the lake below. Daenerys screamed. The other dragons roared in mourning. Jon looked at her and saw something inside her die. We have to go, he shouted, but Daenerys didn't answer. Her eyes stayed on the lake, where her child had fallen beneath the ice. When they landed beyond the wall, Daenerys was silent. The White still growled inside a wooden cage. Proof of the dead, but at what cost? Jon stood beside her, covered in blood and ice. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never should have asked you to come." She looked at him slowly, her face hard but wet with tears. "I'll burn them all," she whispered. "No," Jon said. "Not yet. We show the realm what's coming. We unite. Then we fight." She looked at him again and something shifted. For the first time, she didn't see him as a bastard or a stranger. She saw him as her equal. "What about your crown?" she asked. Jon smiled, faint and tired. "If I bend the knee, will you help us fight?" Daenerys nodded. "Then you have my sword," Jon said. "And my life, your grace." Back in King's Landing, the mood had changed. Cersei stood beside the Iron Throne, watching her enemies arrive. Daenerys, dressed in black and silver, her dragons circling high above the city. Jon Snow in thick northern furs, silent and grim. Tyrion walking beside them like a man who knew too much. When the cage was opened and the dead creature crawled out, snarling and reaching for blood, even Cersei stepped back in fear. It took the hound to chop it into pieces before anyone breathed again. "This is what's coming," Jon said. "And it won't stop for walls or crowns." Cersei was quiet for a long time. Then she smiled. "Then we will send our armies north." Tyrion blinked. "You will?" "Yes," she said smoothly. "We will fight together." But when the meeting ended and her allies left the room, Cersei turned to Jaime. "I lied." "What?" he said, stunned. "We won't send troops. Let the north burn. Let the dragons die. Then we'll deal with whoever survives." Jaime stared at her in horror. "You'd let the world die." "I'd let it bleed," she said coldly, "as long as I'm still sitting here when it's over." Jaime walked away, armor clinking, eyes full of disgust. He didn't say a word. In Winterfell, Ned Stark stood beside Bran, who now spoke in riddles and watched the past through ravens. "They're coming," Bran said. "The wall has fallen." Ned froze. "What did you say?" Bran looked up with eyes pale and endless. "The dragon died, but the dead raised it beyond the wall. The lake where Viserion had fallen was no longer still. Chains pulled something huge from the ice. The Night King watched as the dead dragon rose again, its eyes glowing bright blue, its wings cracked open like torn paper, its neck twisted unnaturally. It was no longer Viserion, it was death with wings. The wall at Eastwatch stood tall for thousands of years, but it had never seen a dragon of ice. When White Viserion unleashed his blue flame, the wall didn't just melt. It exploded, shattered. Stone flew for miles. Ice broke like glass. Screams echoed as the dead surged forward. The wall fell, and with it the final defense of the living. In the great hall of Winterfell, ravens poured in. Men screamed. Horns sounded. Jon turned to Daenerys. She nodded. "It begins." And in the silence, Ned Stark picked up his sword. "I was born of fire and frost," he said. "Let them come. Let them find the cold Wolf King waiting.